Welcome to the Whiskey One Channels podcast. We have a featured guest from the Lost Whiskey House. His name is James Kunz, and he's the head blender. I'm really excited to get a chance to hear his story, his journey. We'll talk a little whiskey, of course. We're going to be sipping some stuff that he wanted me to try, and we might even get into one of their latest releases. We'll see if we have time. But just so you guys know, I'm super excited about this because I've been a fan of Lost Whiskey since at least 2015. I remember my first bottle was their Four Grain Bourbon, and I didn't have a clue what I was in store for. I just knew that the bottle looked really awesome. And without further ado, let's dive into this. James, welcome to the channel. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you.
You got it. You got it. So, like I said, you are the head blender for Lost Whiskey. And first and foremost, I would like to hear about you and your journey. Like, how did you end up with Laws and becoming a head blender?
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess it all started for me probably back in college with some roommates and a homebrew kit. And we just decided this whole homebrewing thing looks interesting and exciting and probably a way to save a little bit of money on drinking good beer. Well, at the time we thought it was good beer, but it probably wasn't. But we learned about fermentation and brewing at the time, and we thought that was really cool. And so we dove in head first. Um, Dabbled with home brewing, a lot of home fermentations. Besides that, making pickles and sauerkraut and sourdough and stuff like that, which I still do. Um, that turned into then working at Prost Brewing Company in Denver here. They're still around. They had a huge expansion recently. It's a lager-focused, lager-centric brewery making traditional German lagers and then some other stuff too. So was lucky enough to learn production on a fairly large scale for craft brewing at the time, or at least in Denver. I think we were on a 35 barrel brew house system. So we were making pretty big batches of beer. Worked there for a couple years. And at the time I was enrolled in brewing school. Regis University here in Denver has a brewing sciences program. So I was in that. It's a 1 year program. And during that, probably in the last 6 months that I was in brewing school, I decided, well, I kind of want to try my hand at making whiskey. And so some other friends and I had been tooling around with some home distillation in the garage. Some friends, we got together and we had a bunch of ingredients, working at breweries. So we got all the free yeast and malt we could ever want.
Nice.
So we were just messing around, and so even
Any
before
explosions?
no, we were extra careful. But looking back on it, I definitely could I cringe a little bit, but whatever. It was a learning experience, and we made stuff that was drinkable.
And it was
Um,
about having fun, right?
yeah, absolutely, and just kind of continuing that learning by doing sort of thing. So. Um, Finished brewing school. At the time, I was just looking around in the distilling industry in Denver, and just happened to knock on the right door at the right time. And Laws was hiring in the distillery. That was 9 years ago.
Holy cow.
So it's kind of funny when you start in the distillery. You start. It's I don't want to call it a probationary period, but it's kind of like they called me the mop and bucket guy for a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah. You got to
And I
pay
was
your dues, right?
like, guys, I was making tanks of 100 barrel tanks of lager beer, and I'm the mop and bucket guy. But it was actually really nice going from having like huge responsibilities down to focusing on the mop and bucket for a little while. And it worked out. It's more a period to see kind of how you gel with the crew. So needless to say, that worked out. And was in the distillery worked as a distiller here for about 4.5 years. So learned all about distillation, how to run our equipment, got really very familiar with our farmers. They've become really close friends of ours, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But so, um, going on about 4.5 years ago now, an opportunity opened up in the barrel house. Our former barrel house manager was on his way out to pursue other things, and I just decided to apply for the position, and I got it. So um, it was a huge learning experience. I was left sort of the keys to the kingdom as far as um, figuring it out as I was going. I was already very familiar with our products, both having distilled the products and, you know, drinking a decent amount of our whiskey over the years. But then it came time to learn how to select barrels and blend batches and all that good stuff. So that turned into management of the barrel house, which grew even bigger. And now my title is the head blender. So I manage about half of our production here. The other half is run by Sam Poirier, who's our head distiller. So,
I've had a chance to talk with Sam. Uh, did a video with him where we walked through the barrel house, and he had me try different whiskey straight from the barrel. And he knows I'm a big malt guy, so we tried a couple of his experimentations.
oh yeah, yep, yeah. Sam's also a big malt guy, so I'm sure he was happy to show you some of his favorites.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like malt? Come on.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Well, very cool. So on that note, like, who do you like working with the most at Laws?
Oh man, that's a tough question.
Is that going to get you in trouble?
No, no.
Just kidding.
Gosh, it's such a collaborative environment here. Everybody's involved in one way or another, and I try and involve everybody that I can in making batches and the sensory experience and selecting batches. So, um, just to give you a little bit of a background on it, when I'm putting together a batch, I'll pull all my barrel samples and make some test batches, and then I bring in as many people as I can to taste those test batches. So I found people in our office, actually, some of them have really good, really sharp palates. A couple of them I really lean on actually for their opinions. Um, but who do I like to work with the most? I'm going to
Yeah,
say Mary.
yeah. Like, is there anybody that when you come into work, it just you're having a good day? Like,
Yeah.
even when you're feeling kind of like, I don't want to be here today. I want to go fishing.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Marianne Laws. She's Al's wife.
Very
She's
cool.
the most pleasant. She's so organized. She's so on top of things, and working with her makes my life easier. So I try and do the same for her. But
I,
she's
you
a
didn't
wonderful person.
you didn't catch it on camera because she's behind in the production here. But my wife Brenna is a big fan of Marianne. She really
Yeah,
likes her. They've
uh,
had chances to talk and get to know each other. So she was
she's
like,
yeah, she's the best.
she is. She's
Yeah,
very cool. I remember when I met her for the first time, I didn't know who she was. I was just asking around like for a couple of people. She said, "Hey, come follow me." I was like,
yeah,
"All right, I'll follow." And then before you know it, someone's like, "Oh, did you run into Marianne?" I was like, "I don't know." I think that
right.
was Marianne, but
Yeah,
she was really nice and cordial.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, so on that note, right? One thing I'm going to mention is you sent me, for those of you watching, our viewers, he sent me not one, not two or three, but four samples. Technically, the fourth one's a bottle. But anyway, this first one is a bonded 4 grain bourbon. It's 7 years, and we're going to be trying that. The next is the the rye. It's also a 7 year bonded. And before we get into the mystery bottle, we have the Rackhouse Series, which was recently released. It's at 95 proof, and it's essentially a blend of the bourbon and the rye. And I don't want to, you know, mitigate like all the work you put into it, but essentially it's a blend of bourbon and rye, correct?
That's, yep.
Okay. So should we start with anything in particular?
We should probably start with the bonded bourbon.
You got it. You got it. So I'm gonna have me a pour now. Um, and here's something that you didn't know. I'm gonna mention now for the first time. When I got the samples, a little of the whiskey seeped out of them, and
Oh
oh
yeah.
my, did it smell so good. I was it smelled so good. In fact, I was like telling my wife, "Hey babe, you got to smell this." And I was giving her like the bubble wrap. She's like, "What
Yeah.
what am I about to smell?" And
Uh,
no, it smelled amazing. All
I'm
right.
su- I'm surprised that you have the self restraint to not try it until now.
James, something you'll learn about me is I have a lot of whiskey, maybe a little too much whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's
So
all
I
right.
had something to hold me back. All right.
Yeah.
So we got the bourbon here. What do I actually? What should the viewers watching this like know about the four grain bourbon? Is there anything in particular that you want to share?
Yeah, so the Four Grain Bourbon is our flagship whiskey. This is the bottled and bond version of that. So the regular, or I shouldn't call it regular, but flagship Four Grain Bourbon is 95 proof, bottled at 3.5 to 4 years. The mash bill is 60% corn, 20% wheat, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. All of the grains are grown in Colorado. The corn comes from out east near the Kansas border, near Burlington, Colorado, grown by the Whiskey Sisters. And they supply a lot of distilleries in the area. And then the wheat, rye, and barley come from the San Luis Valley down south, pretty close to New Mexico. Um, and that's Colorado Malting Company, run by the Cody family. So we've gotten very close with our farmers. It's a really great relationship that we have with them, and we like to think that their grains grown in these specific regions add a nice terroir to the whiskey, and we have worked very hard to preserve that flavor of the grain. So that was the 95 proof bourbon. This is the 100 proof bottled in bond version of that. So it's 7 years.
Yeah.
We launched probably I want to say 7 years ago with our first bottled in bond product, and that was bottled in bond bourbon at 4 years. And to our knowledge, it's the first bottled in bond whiskey in Colorado. And since then, we've upped the age statement over the years to 6 years, and then up to 8 years, and then this release is 7 years. The reason for that fluctuation in age is typically just barrel selection, what we have available, and kind of what's going to go best in that batch for that year's offering. So, some people, I'm sure you've talked about on your podcast before with other people, some people think that older means better, and that's not always the case. So last year's was 8 years. This year is 7 years. I think it's quite delicious myself. So
All right. Well, let's have a taste.
yeah,
Cheers. Hmm. And you're not lying. You really don't need a long time for this to develop really well. Like I said, my first experience was, I think it was a 3 or a 4 year, if I'm not mistaken. And it had the original, it had the gold foil on the label. And those were
yeah,
like the legacy labels. And all I remember is that it had a very unique flavor and style. I think, reading it for the first time, that label saying four grain, I thought to myself, well, how many grains are in bourbon? I didn't I didn't know at the time. I was kind of ignorant to it. And certainly I thought, okay, that just means it's going to be very complex and nuanced and I should really appreciate it. And it wasn't very hard to appreciate it. I'll just tell you that.
thank you. Yeah, yeah. The whole idea with the four grain is, you have your high rye bourbons and your wheated bourbons, and this kind of is a happy medium and marries all of those grains together. We call them the four American mother grains. So you have that rye spice, that earthiness, but the softness of the wheat also comes in, and the bright fruit flavor as well. So at this age, 7 years, well, really between 6 and 8 years, I think for our whiskey, um, we get a really nice balance between the grain flavor in the distillate and the barrel.
Sure.
And
So that's your sweet spot.
yeah, I mean, it varies from barrel to barrel. You could find some older barrels that aren't too oaky, but typically after about 8 years, they become pretty oak dominant for us, and we're aging our barrels, or all of our barrels, at mile high above sea level in a dry climate. So we get a lot of temperature fluctuations. We get barometric pressure changes, and it's dry here, in
Super
comparison
dry.
to other
Yeah,
places.
I think that contributes to like a faster or a hyper, not hyper aging, but it definitely makes the aging process go by quicker.
Yeah, I mean, you're picking up more mature barrel notes in the short term, so
Mhm.
that can be a good thing. At least we think so.
You certainly don't have to wait long enough to get the good stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So the bourbon is exactly how I remember it. It's 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 sweet, but not overly sweet. It does have that nice presence of the wheat, like you were saying. And the mintiness of the rye is just enough to kind of capture your attention at that point. And the barley is just it is subtle. I realize that 10% of your mash bills, you're not going to get a huge amount of that malt, but
Yeah.
it is definitely enough to give it a nuttiness.
Yeah, and well, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that it's not the sweetest bourbon, and that's by design. We all around here, we love Kentucky bourbon. We drink a lot of it, but this is something different. It's only 60% corn in the mash bill, and so it's going to be less perceived sweetness anyway. Those other three grains are going to come forward, and it really allows those three, wheat, rye, and barley, to shine. So not taking over, but kind of balancing. And our whiskey typically, not every product, but typically ends kind of dry, which I like.
Hmm.
It kind of keeps you coming back for a few more sips, which is it's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can have it with pretty much any kind of food pairing, right? It's not just okay, this only pairs well with your entree or this only pairs well with a dessert.
Yeah.
Real flexible. Okay, I like the bourbon, but we have quite a bit to get to. Which
Yeah.
one do you want to hop onto next?
I would suggest the rye, bonded rye.
Okay. I'll finish this bourbon and pour a little rye. Mm. And on that note, just out of curiosity, do you, not to put you on the spot, but do you have a favorite? Is it the bourbon, the rye, the malt?
Oh, that probably just depends on the day.
Your mood, right? That's that's
Yeah,
kind of how I am.
yeah, but I'd say overall I gravitate towards the rye a little bit more. I love all our products, but I probably drink more rye. And,
That makes two of us, by the way. I'm a
yeah,
huge fan of the rye.
yeah, it's a really special whiskey in my opinion. Um, it's a so the mash bill, if you want to get into it,
I do.
um, the mash bill is 100% rye. As I said before, it's grown by the Cody family at Colorado Malting Company. The variety of rye is called San Luis Valley. So San Luis Valley rye. So there are other types of rye grown all over the world. This particular rye only grows in the San Luis Valley. Nobody knows exactly where it came from. That area was settled by European settlers, over the last few hundred years, and those people brought rye with them. So for a long time, rye was planted as a cover crop during seasons where they were just going to let their fields go dormant, And in the area, they mostly grew potatoes, some wheat, a little barley, but rye in particular is really great for farmers as a cover crop because it fixes nitrogen in the soil. So a lot of farmers would not even bother harvesting it, and they would just till it back into the earth. But it's been growing there for so long; it's so unique. As I said, nobody knows exactly where it came from, but the Cody's decided to capitalize on that because it's so different from a lot of ryes. It's super earthy, it's peppery, it's bright, and we use 100% of it in the mash bill. So it's 50% malted rye and 50% raw rye.
You guys make a rye that I could truly live with for the rest of my life. I did a video where I was trying to think about like, what is the one whiskey that if you were on a deserted island, what could you live with for the rest of your life? You know, something that wasn't just good for the moment, but like it, it's like that song that's timeless. You could listen to it now, even though it came out like 20, 30 years ago. So, uh, cheers.
Cheers.
Mm. Yeah, just as I remember it. And I think now that they get a little older, because I'm used to 4, 5, 6, that 7 years a treat.
Yeah.
I really do like this, and I do like the fact that it's ramped up in proof, even if it is slightly. I do like it being 100 proof.
Yeah. Yeah. I like most of my whiskeys at 100 proof. If we're just kind of piloting a new product and kind of playing around with different, blends or whatever, I usually start my test blends at 100 proof just because, you know, it's 50% ABV. And it really, I think, allows the whiskey to shine. You're going to get a pretty real representation of the whiskey in the glass. It's a little bit hot, but it's 100 proof, and it's not your 80 proof stuff off the bottom of the shelf. So
And thank
um,
goodness it's not.
yeah,
I'm not a
yeah.
fan of 80 proof.
I can't remember the last time I bought 80 proof whiskey, but it was a long time ago.
I think a lot of us, like in the community, have become a little bit snobbish when it comes to proof, right? Like I remember back in the day, like 80 proof was just what you found. If you found something a little over there, over that 80 proof, it was rare. And now
Yeah,
it's you know, let me think about this. 47, 46% alcohol. It seems to be the new standard. But like you said, I tend to like it higher in proof. I'm a
yeah,
bit of a proof hound though.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so this particular mash bill, as I said, is 100% rye. Um, like with all of our whiskeys, the whole idea is to showcase the grain, the four mother grains that we work with, and really preserve the flavor. So I think out of all of our products, to me, the rye really showcases the flavor of the grain the best.
Yeah.
So much so that actually my personal barrel is rye. I picked a rye
Okay.
barrel.
Okay. So that was your personal barrel. So for those of you guys that are not in the know, and I don't know if I can reveal this, so maybe I'll just cut this out. But like, if you work for laws for a certain amount of time, I think you get a chance to have your very own barrel.
So if you work here at Laws for 5 years, you get to pick your own barrel, your personal barrel of whiskey. And within the company, rye has become kind of a favorite of the employees. We have most employees who own barrels have rye. There are a couple of people who own bourbon barrels, and then there's one person who's kind of the outlier, and she has a corn barrel. But they're all good. They're
Wow.
all really tasty. You can't make a wrong pick, really.
I think that may have something to do, and I'm talking about the corn barrel pick. You guys changed up your corn whiskey a little bit. Like I remember the first iterations of the corn whiskey. That was like my least favorite. It just didn't have that depth and complexity like the rest of your whiskeys. but you guys came out with the 1 liter bottle of the corn whiskey, and I thought, wow, they changed something up because it's got some buttery hazelnut
Yeah.
notes, and I thought it was pretty darn tasty.
Yep. The thing that we changed, two things. One, it's older. So that first release of the corn was a 4 year bottled in bond corn.
Gotcha.
Um, the most recent release, I believe, was a 7 or 8 year, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was probably about 7 years. And that had some roasted corn in the mash bill. So um, a huge advantage to working so closely with our farmers and maltsters is that we can give them feedback and we can sort of kick around ideas with them and they can come up, we can all sort of brainstorm ideas. So probably late one evening, drinking some whiskey in the conference room, we were just talking about ideas, and someone came up with the idea of putting roasted corn in the mash bill. And so we contacted the maltsters at Colorado
Hmm.
Malting, and they have a drum roaster. So we actually took corn from the Whiskey Sisters out east. We sent it down south. They ran it through their roaster and sent it back out to us, and it is a very roasty flavor. It tastes like
Hmm.
popcorn.
Yeah, no, it
So
does. It really does. That was a good call, by the way. So whoever did that, shout out to them,
yeah, yeah,
because I
definitely.
I think it kind of brought to the forefront like corn whiskey in a very different way. Because I just remember when you guys released your corn whiskey, it wasn't really announced. It's just something that you saw at the tasting room.
Yeah, yep.
So I was really happy to see that.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Get some caramel. I think the first thing for me that stands
Are
out
you tired of having a
is
trash palate?
it smells a lot like lemon meringue pie.
Do you find yourself never getting all those flavors you keep hearing about?
Citrus forward,
Does your glassware feel dull and uninspired?
pineapple,
Are you ready to have the best palate south of Iceland?
lemon rice.
Well, then it's time to get your very own Whiskey One Glencairn.
Mind you, I think if we were having like a 10 year, an 8 year, even a 12 year, you would get a little bit more peat. My
That makes
experience
whiskey so much better.
Contact us now to place your order of limited edition, exclusive and rare, American-made Whiskey One Glencairns. Now for the low non-chill filtered and anti-inflation rate of $10 plus shipping and handling. Taste improvement has not been scientifically proven in any way, but you probably knew that already.
necessarily.
Yeah.
All right, so it is time to get into our Rackhouse Series 95 proof. And this is
Yeah.
your first release from the Rackhouse series, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'm
we
gonna cleanse the glass while you talk.
sure. Yeah. We released this a few months ago. This is something that we've been working on in the rack house probably for a year or two. Um, sometimes when you have a little extra time on your hands and you got a whole bunch of whiskey in front of you, you just start messing around with, um, you know, different concoctions. And so it kind of dawned on me at one point that we are a whiskey house. We have all these different mash bills. We have different ways, different types of barrels, different ways of aging, blending, etc. And so this really started out as an exercise just to kind of play around with different mash bills together. And I just kept coming back to our 4 grain bourbon blended with our rye whiskey, and it worked out pretty well. So this is a 70%, I'm sorry, 60% 4 grain bourbon, 40% San Luis Valley straight rye. This is going to be a 4 barrel series, this particular one. This is the first of that series. So we blended this in a tank. We rebarreled those into other barrels, actually put it back into rye barrels. And I wanted to just pick up just a little extra rye flavor in there. So
Okay, so it got like secondary aging. It wasn't just a blend of 2 barrels and that's it. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, the whole idea is just to let it integrate and kind of get to know itself. Um, that first barrel came out of rye. I put actually all of them into rye barrels, and then
Okay,
I rebarreled the remaining three. I rebarreled so people can look forward to some future releases.
nice.
We've got one finishing in an Armagnac barrel. So it's a French grape brandy, similar to cognac,
Nice.
um, French oak barrel. We've got one in an Amaro barrel. This is house made Amaro that we make here. It's not released under the Lost Whiskey House label, but it's the Gargoyle Series label.
Okay.
And then the fourth and final of this particular blend series is a double oak version. So keep an eye out for all three of those next releases.
So I'm gonna make a plug for you guys.
All right.
If you guys are fans of Law's Whiskey, you seriously have to become a gargoyle. Become a member. It's an exclusive club, if you will, but it's not something that you have to pay into or pay dues or anything like that. If you're interested in becoming a gargoyle, send me an email. I'll leave information here in the video. Uh, just contact me, and I'll send you a link to get signed up.
Yeah, it's a really great opportunity for people to kind of get information on upcoming releases, and we have semi-annual parties where the gargoyles come mingle around in the rack house. We're building a new tasting room right now, and when that's open, we'll have a gargoyle event in the tasting room. So it's a great opportunity just to meet with other people who are laws enthusiasts.
Honestly, the gargoyle events are fantastic. They're really cool. It's not just, hey, come to the, I don't know, come to the distillery, try a few things, and then we'll see you later.
Yeah.
It's an extravaganza. And I don't want to like leak out like what you guys do during these events because they are fun and I want them to be surprises when they go, but it really is fun. It's a good time. It's a great way to actually meet the Lost Whiskey Village. Like that was my opportunity to meet some of you. I met Sam for the first time, his wife who works there. Crystal has introduced me to quite a few of the folks that actually work there, and it's a really fun experience. You actually get to meet and greet the folks that make this great, delicious whiskey.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's always fun for us, and when I can make it to those events, I do, just because it's a great opportunity to meet people and mingle, and yeah, it's fun.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into this one, huh?
All right,
Cheers.
cheers.
Okay. You know what I noticed about this, like right off the top? I think that blend adds adds like a fruity layer to it, like up front. There's
Hmm.
a almost like a nutty stone fruit component to it that initially I get. Um, Sort of opens up into a little bit of chocolate too.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
interesting.
I was drawn in this particular blend. I was drawn to barrels that were already pretty fruit forward. Um, I don't recall the ages on these, to be honest with you. They're probably over 4 years, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And I'm just looking at the tasting notes on the label right now. I said sweet tobacco, lemon, strawberry, green apple, and cola, which are not notes that I would typically associate with bourbon and rye, bourbon or rye, especially if you're looking at like traditional Kentucky whiskeys. Whatever that particular day, I was probably just in that headspace. And so when I was writing the tasting, I was like, yeah, lemon and strawberry and green apple and cola. But, some of that definitely carries through. And I also like one really prominent note that I get on this is marshmallow, which is not exclusive to this particular product, but I get it
Right.
in some of the other whiskeys. So I really love it. It's it's a favorite of mine.
And let me ask you, because the folks that are watching are probably wondering if they can get their hands on it yet or still. I believe you guys released this maybe 2, 3 months ago. Do you guys still have some?
So this is for sale on. The name escapes me. It's if you go to our website, you can buy
Sure.
through our website. Um, there's a third party that actually is our online distributor, and
Okay.
so it
So it's
goes through.
still available.
It should be. And if
Okay.
this particular release is not available, keep an eye out because we're coming out with the next. We've got three more barrels of it, so it's
Okay.
just going to be a process of picking the barrel that's ready, and then coming up with the proof that we want.
It's interesting that you started like going through the tasting notes, right? And now that you've told me the tasting notes, I usually get like a very heavy minty flavor from rye, but I feel like yes, I get the lemon, I get the tobacco now. It's
Yeah,
opening up now after it's kind of breathed a little bit. And I will say that like between the four grain bourbon, the rye, this I'm gravitating more towards this because it's an amalgam of both of those things, and you're getting the best of both worlds, like a
yeah,
blend.
yeah,
Who
yeah.
would have
We
thought?
figured, like figured that it was kind of I don't want to say it like a safe first release in this, but like we weren't venturing out into the unknown too far. Like we wanted to come out with something bold and unique for us. It's not going to be super crazy. We're going to get there with future releases of this product.
Hmm.
Different blends, different finishes. That's where we really get into the nitty gritty back here in the Rackhouse. So that's why it's called the Rackhouse series.
Once this breathes a little bit, that toasted marshmallow really starts to come up. Yeah, I'm getting that. I'm getting more lemon now, but it feels buttery. And you know how we were talking about your latest corn whiskey releases?
Yeah.
I'm getting a buttered popcorn note.
Yeah, definitely. I love butter and whiskey. Coming from the beer world, as a lager brewer specifically, and like beer judge training and all that stuff, butter is a really bad flavor. It's an off note in beer. And if you ever taste it in beer, it's considered a flaw. In whiskey,
Interesting.
however, I personally really like it because it adds depth. It adds a lot of mouthfeel. So
Right.
it's a byproduct made in during fermentation, that carries through distillation and well into aging, and I think it adds a lot of depth to the character of the final product. So I like it.
I'm enjoying it, especially on whiskey, and it's rare that I get a butter note in beer. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. Now I'm actually going to look for it.
Keep an eye
Um,
out; you'll spot it.
you know what they say in whiskey is like look out for the sulfur note. If you get a sulfur note, that's a sign that something didn't go quite right. So
Yep. Yeah,
um,
definitely.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the whole Rickhouse series labeling. So you guys typically put out what are called experiential releases, and now we see the Rickhouse series. Is there something we need to know about, like that transition? Is that just a different category of whiskey that you guys are putting out, or are you segueing into Rickhouse series?
So we're keeping those separate. Experience. It's sort of, I guess you could consider it part of the experiential series if you want to, sort of in that family. Um, for those of your viewers who are watching, the experiential series is kind of anything that falls outside of our normal offerings, and by that I mean flagship rye and bourbon, bonded rye bourbon, wheat, stuff like that. The experiential are kind of the one-off, sort of project barrels that we do, or project batches that we do. And the whole idea with that is, we give you all the stats on the barrels, when it was distilled, when it was harvested, when it
Yeah.
was put into a finishing cask, all that stuff.
But by the way, real quick, I'm going to show that off because I would say that Laws has one of the highest levels of transparency in their labeling. I don't know if you can kind of see that. Well, I'll try it. There we go. So you can kind of see the deets. Ton of information. If you're a whiskey nerd like me, like this is the stuff that you live for because you want to know that kind of stuff. And it helps to really show that like a brand is really doing it right. If they're showing you what they're doing, how they're doing it, then you know they're not, cutting corners, which is something that you guys are pretty much opposed to, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the whole ethos of the company is there are no shortcuts. So we'd like to do things. Well, I don't know if there is one right way to do it, but we believe it's the right way to do it.
Sure.
That's just giving our products the time they need to develop in the barrel, and then even with cutting down to proof, we do that over the period of several days or weeks, as opposed to cutting just in one day. So anyway, that's the Experiential series. The Rackhouse series is sort of an offshoot from that, and that's going to be specifically sort of highlighting the blending of mash bills.
Yep.
So, like I said before, we're a whiskey house. I like to think of it as all these mash bills are kind of like paints on the palette, and we've got four main mash bills, and we've got those mash bills then finished in different types of cooperage and different ages and different proofs. So we've got a lot to work with, and we're kind of scratching the surface here just with this first release.
Well, after tasting it, because I didn't get an opportunity to taste it during the last Gargoyles event, my best friend Orland, he was able to attend, and I was supposed to go, but something came up. He was telling me all about it, and I was like, man, I'm a little jelly right now. I wish I could have tried it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I got to try it after all, so I'm gonna rub it in his face.
There you go.
Okay, so I think one of the obvious questions that fans of Law's whiskey have is, we're sort of at the very beginning of the year. So what's in store for 2024?
What's in store for this year? Well, so far, I've been trying to wrap my head around our new packaging system, which has been a delight. Um, I do mean that it was like, I mean, it's interesting and fun, but also a bunch of headaches. But anybody who's worked in automation could probably sympathize with that. Um, but as far as product releases go, more Rackhouse Series releases, like we were talking about. More, every year we have these annual releases. We've got our honey finished bourbon, honey barrel bourbon. We've got our Curacao finished wheat. We have our cognac cask finished bourbon. That's its whole. That's its own
Yep.
program.
I have
Uh,
batches 1, 2, and 3. So I'm
oh,
eager to see like how those batches evolve over time.
yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely send you some of that.
That would be
Um,
awesome. So on that note, I got to ask because it leads into the discussion about Madeira cask finished bourbon. You guys sent me this little gem here, and I would
yeah,
love to try that with you while we're talking. Do you guys see yourself doing more like wine cask aging?
yeah, definitely. So we've got that Madeira cask bourbon. That's one of three barrels that we had. And we actually just sold the last one. Something fun about this particular product, which we've kind of worked on with other wine finishes. Um, it's a fortified wine, Madeira, similar to port or sherry or sauterne. So high alcohol, sweet wines, typically aged in French oak, European wines. Um, they're big on flavor. Those barrels, when we get them, still have wine in them a little bit. So they're fully seasoned. And the bourbon sat, you can probably see on the label. I don't remember off the top of my head, but the bourbon sat in those barrels for probably like 2 years prior to then blending out with more straight bourbon because it was
Oh wow.
so wine heavy. I mean, we wanted to get all of the wine character out of those barrels, and they were amazing barrels. They were beautifully constructed. They were in great shape. Um, but it pulled wine character pretty aggressively out of the wood.
So
Being
so they were wet barrels
they
essentially.
were there was a
Nice.
decent amount of wine left over in them,
Very
and
nice.
being high proof spirit going into a barrel that held wine at probably like, I don't know, 20% alcohol or something like that, it pulls that wine out of the wood really quickly. So um, what we did was we blended that out with some straight bourbon to make 2 barrels of Madeira finished bourbon into 3 barrels. And that was really just by taste. It was not to get like, it wasn't like, oh, we got to make more of this. It was more
Just
just,
right.
you know,
Not doing it just to say you did it.
it was 2 parts of the wine finish to 1 part straight bourbon was the magic number. And then we rebarreled that into just regular ex bourbon barrels just for another few months, just to kind of come together again, just like we did with the
Sure.
Rackhouse series. And we're finding that it works really well. Like I said earlier, for the whiskey to kind of get to know itself. There's a lot of like unknown that happens in there, but it breathes. It kind of comes together over time. So that's what we did.
I really hope you guys continue to, make the Madeira cast finish, because I'm gonna tell you right now, I haven't tasted it yet, but it smells like a chocolate bomb.
Yeah,
Like no chocolate covered cherries, really. It's really fruity, but it's also chocolatey and nutty right up front.
yeah, yeah, definitely. It pairs really nicely with smoked almonds. I found
Ooh,
that's kind of my favorite thing to eat with this particular product.
okay. Well, now that you mention it, I may have to go find some smoked almonds.
Yeah, you should.
This is a whiskey sippers bottle, by the way. That Madeira cast finish is something special. So cheers to you. I'm gonna have a little sip.
Cheers. I have not tried this. I have not tried it with a cigar, but I think it would probably go really nicely with a nice Maduro.
You're a Maduro man like me.
Yeah,
We got stuff in common because I like them dark.
yeah.
James, certainly I got a chance and an opportunity to meet you. I know the folks watching did too. This is really awesome to hear your story. Um,
100%.
get to hear a different side of the process, because when I sat down with Sam, he talked a lot about the distillation process. There was some blending conversations there. Most of it was experimentations and some of the stuff that you guys are gonna experiment with. And I'm glad that you got to share what you guys have for this year and the years to come. Um, if I can do a plug though, I'm really liking the Rackhouse series. I hope you guys make that like a staple. And of course that Madeira cask is beautiful. You guys did an amazing job with that.
Thank
Seriously.
you. Yeah, well, I love all of our products and mash bills, as I said before, but really where my interest lies, my passion lies, is the cask finishing and now sort of the blending of mash bills. So it's really nice to be able to get that out there and have people try it and hear about it.
So I got a question for you. If I'm in Denver, can I impose one of these days and just pop in and see you in action?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
That would be awesome. All right, folks. So for you watching, thank you for joining us, getting a chance to meet James and hearing more about Law's Whiskey. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for the experience, letting me try your blend, your Madeira finish, and of course, just kind of really see by themselves how they progress and evolve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This was something special, so I do appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Yep, I hope to have you back. We'll see.
Yeah, I'll be back.
All right, here at Whiskey One, it's about the one you enjoy. Cheers.